Welcome to Starfleet Boy, where we have a casual and informal discussion about our beloved series, Star Trek. We're back on another exciting episode of Starfleet Boy, where we have a casual and informal conversation about Star Trek. Today we are, oh my god, in season 7. This is it! The final countdown. It is the final countdown. You have to admit that was appropriate.
That was a wonderful impression of the band Europe.
Europe? Audience, pause this video and go put on the final countdown by Europe if you don't know it. It's an important song to know in life.
in your enthusiasm, we didn't do the clap.
Oh shit! Now we have to. We've been a little bit transparent about how we do this podcast, so here comes the clap. Ready?
Da, 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 da.
Can we do it? Wait. Can we do it with the final countdown to stay on the theme? So after every do-do-do-do, clap, clap. Do-do-do-do-do, do-do-do-do. Okay, here we go. Ready? Here we go. Okay. Do-do-do-do, do-do-do-do-do, do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Okay, there we go. That's enough. That's more final countdown than anyone ever needs in there.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Doctor, welcome back to Starfleet Boy, and welcome to season 7 of both our show and of Star Trek The Next Generation. Holy crap.
Are our seasons in line with the seasons of the show as well? I didn't know that. I thought each show that we did would be a season.
Informally, our seasons.
I thought this is still our season 1.
No, informally, I've been lining them up.
Really, I didn't know that
with TNG. So, I don't know. That's a good thing to explore. Since we are casual and informal, we can change it at any point. There's no rules on Starfleet. There are no rules.
There are not.
We can change the great thing about being casual and informal is that you can change it up, and people are okay with it. Because if you've come to this show and you were expecting something more formal and more intense, you're in the wrong place. You're in the wrong place.
Go watch Trek Yards or something.
They're not. Come on, they're wonderfully informal.
No, I know, but I'm saying they're more. They have a budget and. Yeah.
They have a budget. We don't have a budget. We could have a budget, but we don't have a budget.
No budget. No budget at all.
No budget. No. What is it that Hammond says in Jurassic Park? We spare no expense on Starfleet Boy.
Right.
Literally, there is no
expense. No expense has been nothing. 0 cents.
No, there is a cost to Starfleet Boy, but it's a passion. It's a passion project, and so far I've been very fortunate that I've been able to afford the cost, Doctor. So, thank you.
Thank you. And one of the costs is you subsidize this wonderful microphone that I have right here. Wonderful mic.
We have you back in correct audio this week, so the ASMR audience will be very pleased about that. Hey, thanks for coming on so early. I confused you, and I appreciate that we're completing, because Descent is still fresh in my mind. Descent Part 2.
Right.
And I hope
less so in mine, but okay.
That's okay. I've got notes. I've got my notes pulled up.
Good.
We're
gonna need them.
Doctor, last time we got together, we talked a lot. Actually, we delved into some of the themes of Part 2. But I think that since we're back and we're talking about this opener, do you want to do the summary or should I do the summary? You want to try?
No.
All right, I'm going to do the summary.
I can't do the summary at all. I mean, I vaguely remember... Wait, let me test myself.
All right. I love that.
I mean, what I remember is that obviously Picard, Troy, and Geordi are captured, and they're taken to a holding cell where we learn that Data is just completely, Hannibal Lecter. And
well, yeah,
him and Lore are
Hannibal Lecter. I think that's actually Lore. No, like Data's more like Clarice.
No,
He's seduced.
Doesn't
Clarice become a cannibal later in the novels or something like that, or somewhere along the line? Doesn't she go on like a cannibal like fantasy
cannibal
with
love
Hannibal?
Story?
Doesn't it become really dark like that or something like that? I forget. I don't remember.
You forget. There we go. So,
but you're not. You're doing a good job so far.
So this episode is pretty much cut between three different plot lines. You've got Picard, Geordi, and Troy trying to figure out why is Data acting this way. Can we get him back? You've got Crusher, who tried to evacuate everybody they could off the planet,
and
but
also,
they left about 100 or so people.
Wait! I'm going to interrupt you. Crusher being a badass captain, also, by the way. I don't know if you agree.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So Crusher being a badass captain, and she actually defies direct orders. She doesn't go back. She sends she doesn't go back to the Alpha Quadrant. She sends a buoy with whatever with the updates as to what's been going on.
The old buoy trick. It's the best trick in the world. It's like I've followed your orders, but I'm going to do my own thing. Technically, right. I've done what you asked. Report our situation to the Federation and ask for help. Now I'm going to help you out. It's so good.
Right.
It's
so now she goes back and she's working with the skeleton crew on the bridge, and she's like, okay, we got to figure out how to get the remaining people off the planet.
We get the new temporary bridge officer who never comes back again. Does she ever come back again? She was awesome. The one
I don't think
the one
so.
Who can the metaphasic she's the one who like studied something about solar something or rather, and then she creates the particle beam that creates the solar flare and destroys that terrible looking brutalist Borg ship.
Yeah, she's smart. She's smart. And then the third leg of the story is Riker and Worf, who stayed behind, are trying to find Picard and his team, and they stumble across a band of Borgs led by none other than Hugh. And these Borgs are sort of
who's really disenchanted with everything. By the way, he's like not the Hugh we remember from that previous episode where we got introduced to Hugh. He's very like, because of you guys, we're fucked. Like when he meets Riker.
Right. So I mean, in no particular order.
And that was our one bad word that we can use on Starfleet Boy. The PG-13. Maybe you could squeeze PG-13. In another. If the spirit moves you, Doctor.
I'll save it for the end. Okay. I'll save it for the rating. So in no particular order, the way everything was resolved is, of course, Riker.
Wait, there's the Geordi thing. Wait, you didn't finish your threads. There's the whole Geordi, Data, Picard.
I'm
Crusher.
getting to it.
Oh, sorry.
You say do the summary, but then you don't let the person do the summary. I said I don't know. In no particular order, I'm going to tell you how the threads resolve.
Sitting on my hands. Sitting on my hands here. Doctor,
so
I apologize. Go
Data is torturing Geordi needlessly. And now they have figured out, between Geordi and Picard, they have figured out that there's a little carrier wave that they have to cut off in order for Data to not feel these psychopathic tendencies, and and so this helps because Data is about to basically melt his brain. Is that what he's not?
Technically speaking, he's gonna replicate all of Geordi's synaptic connections with like fake like fibers or something like that, and then destroy the existing, like his actual
brain.
natural.
Right.
hoping he could turn Geordi's brain into a cybernetic, into a what is Data's brain?
A positronic brain.
Thank you. Hoping he could create I mean, in theory, it's great because Geordi would live forever if it works.
But if it doesn't work, his brain is mush.
The brothers Data, the brothers Sung do not believe in animal testing. They believe in testing. They believe in going directly to the source.
Right.
If we lose
No
Geordi,
trials.
we lose no trials. If we lose Geordi, we lose Geordi. On to the next.
Right. And meanwhile, Riker is trying to convince Hugh. Geordi. These people are in danger. Geordi's your friend. Don't you want to help Geordi? Oh, you don't? Well, screw you. Show us which cavern to go, and then we'll go free our friends. And Hugh, you can kind of tell, is a little like, oh, maybe I should go. And then
Geordi's the connective tissue here. Like
Geordi's
Hugh
the connective
also
tissue.
cares, about Geordi. It's true,
right? Yeah, because Hugh actually asks, "What about Geordi?" And then on the Enterprise, as you said, Crusher and this crew, they're
crushing it.
They're crushing it. They get back to the planet, and they nail it so that in a short amount of time, they're going to beam the remaining people off the planet, and they do so. But then they also have to avoid the brutalist Borg ship, as you say, and they pull this trick where they go. Don't they pretty much go into the corona of the sun?
Well, not quite to the core, but earlier this season, we're in season 7, but in season 6 we had the metaphasic shielding episode,
right?
With the Ferengi scientists. So actually, a really nice. I have to give credit to season 6 and season 7 because we're getting all these tie-ins that we never used to get this kind of like interconnectivity, as far as I'm aware. But we reference a previous episode, and now because of the metaphasic shielding program that engineering was working on implementing, they're able to actually go into the corona of the sun. Apparently they can't go all the way down to the core, but they can like hang out in the corona for like way longer than any other starship. It's a huge advantage. And Crusher trusts her crew, or her sort of skeleton crew, to do it. And really, I don't remember how it all. I mean, I know that eventually. I can help you.
Yeah, help me with the end.
That part.
Help me with the end.
So, this is something we'll probably talk about, but the whole thing, we talked a little bit about it last episode, but the whole thing relies on this weird plan where Picard figures that they can reset Data's ethical programming.
Right.
When they do that, Data actually realizes, oh shit, like, they are successful. They managed to reset his ethical programming, and he comes to and he realizes, what the F am I doing? I can't believe that I was going to kill Geordi. I can't believe all these things were happening. And so he goes and defies Lore, and then Lore threatens to kill him. He even makes this whole speech about like, I'm prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice and kill my brother. And then all of a sudden, Hugh and the collective of Borg that he was kind of like the leader of invade and subdue the bad Borg, the Lore Borg, and they're able, or maybe they're even freeing them actually, because I feel like everyone was imprisoned by Lore. Lore was like the ultimate despot / whatever. And in the fight that ensues, it comes down to a fight between Lore. Like, it's not much of a fight, but it's a confrontation between. It's a confrontation between Lore and Data, and Data's able to overpower Lore and then deactivate him. He actually deactivates Lore, and so then the resolution is that
Talk about the eyes.
Oh yeah, his pupils just disappear and they become these solid things. And I thought that was interesting that in the Picard trailer, Data's pupils represent a dead android, because Data as we know him is dead. It's just the worst.
Dead.
Not a lot of people like to. Even I'm a denier at times. Even I'm like, Data's still in B4.
You? A denier?
I want Data to be alive. Data's, there's so many ways, you could bring back Spock. Can you bring back Data? Come on, can you bring back Data, right? Anyways, I just thought it was interesting because there is a slight design difference in Picard to Data, and so I thought this might be an interesting tie-in or explanation as to why Data's pupils look so beady or tiny, and so maybe it's because it's a dead Data, dead Data,
dead Data.
Data is dead. Admiral.
Data.
Admiral, Data is dead.
That's a very good Savick.
Why? Why does she have to say it like that? She was just so after everything they'd been through. Weren't they lovers, Savick and David?
Yes, they were.
In the Apocrypha. In the Apocrypha.
Not in the Apocrypha. In the book, in the novelization, which is canon, they were. Thank you very much. But she is carrying Spock's baby, so.
Wait. What becomes of the child of Spock and Savick?
What does become of That's a great question.
Interesting.
Maybe Picard will answer.
Maybe it will. But anyways, so at the end of the episode, that's the part I can't remember either. Sheesh. We're going to have to do a little...
I wonder why. Maybe it's not memorable.
Oh, I remember now. So it ends like this. I just remembered. Hugh and Picard, everything's all right. Our heroes are saved. Geordi again goes through the worst punishment imaginable, but he survives. And Picard and Hugh have an exchange in which Picard basically encourages Hugh to be the leader of the Borg, of these offshoot Borg. 25 years later, yeah, that's it. She's just very encouraging, and then off they go, and that's it. If I'm not mistaken.
Wow, I don't remember that at all.
He's basically
I'm not going to deny it.
Picard's basically like, good luck. Good luck, Hugh. Now that you've found your leadership skills, I bid you adieu. But obviously, some crazy shit goes down because things are not right by the time of Picard. Do you think we should have gotten Hugh in First Contact?
No.
You think it's perfect?
I think First Contact's perfect.
But you think
I don't think we should have had Hugh at all.
Oh, ever?
I'm not a huge Hugh fan. I'm not.
You haven't even softened a little over all these years. I know that, by the way, but you haven't softened a little bit. There's no intrigue. So for the upcoming Picard show, you were just telling me how you're optimistic about it, but you're probably not.
I am very optimistic. I'm very optimistic. But I can be optimistic and still not
care for
Hugh. Yeah.
I started watching. I don't know much about 7 of 9. Do you?
What I saw on Voyager.
What did you see? I don't know. I haven't seen much of 7 of 9.
I saw quite a bit of 7 of 9 in a couple of magazines.
Wow. One forgets you were barely out of your teen years. No,
I think I was out of my teen years at that point.
Barely. But, you were in your 20s when Voyager was airing. Doctor, you're an old man now. We're both old men. We're both near the age of Kirk and Spock in Star Trek
2.
What? In Star Trek? No, the motion picture. Because what are they, in their 40s in 2? Are they in their 40s?
No, the whole thing in Star Trek 2 is he just turns 50.
So we're closer to 2. But right? We're around we're Star Trek 1, Kirk and Spock.
We're Star Trek 1. We're in the gray uniforms.
We're in the gray uniforms. We haven't yet gotten. Oh my! Is that what we have to look forward to in our 50s? Is the red uniforms?
The red uniforms.
Heck yeah.
Yes.
Those uniforms. Yes. I'm so excited.
Yes. But bringing it back to the episode, I'm going to be honest with you. I really enjoyed the first part. I think the first part was a lot better than I had remembered. The second part, the second part, I think it just suffers from the fact that you have a lot of, for one thing, I think it suffers from the fact that for me personally, the B plot, which is inarguably what's going on the Enterprise, is much more interesting than what's going on the planet. I really enjoyed seeing Crusher outwit the Borg ship and her command style and the way she would just kind of, she's a very no-nonsense, cut the bullshit kind of way of command where, I think this other guy, the security officer, is trying to give a little bit of pushback to the science officer who came up with the shielding and the core and all that stuff. And
Crusher, that was a good.
Crusher kind of takes
stuff,
her back. She gets
good
her back.
drama.
Yeah.
Did you? And I don't know if you saw this, but I recognized that there was definitely a kind of lineage from Picard's command style to Crusher's command style. I thought there was definitely like some kind of like connective tissue, which is a term a lot of people like to use, and obviously I'm not immune to it, but there was definitely some connective tissue, I thought, between Picard and Crusher, and I really enjoyed that. But she held her own, like Captain Crusher. I mean, for us, it was so inspiring. We obviously see this again in Star Trek at the end of this season. We're going to see it again with All Good Things, but we were so inspired. We went off and we actually wrote.
We've said this many times.
I just think it's great that we have that. Like, it's just such a good thing to have in our belt. In our less formative years when we had more time, more time to do things.
Much more time. Much more time.
We would gather at the in the stacks at the FIU library.
Mm-hmm. Remember that?
What did the Jedi library stacks look like? What do you reckon that place is like? The stacks in the Jedi library.
We saw them in episode 2.
Those weren't the stacks. The stacks are that last floor, the wild last floor with the conference rooms. Remember, we would rent out a conference room every.
Yes, I remember. Week? I was there. Yeah.
We've yet to see those places in the Jedi library.
Bringing it back.
We just saw the main floor.
Bringing it back to the episode. I really enjoyed seeing
the
Crusher, the B plot.
Crushing it.
But then when you go to the A plot, which was in itself split in two, because you had Riker and Worf, who, really those are the two guys that you would rather have encountered Lore and the Borg and Data, because those are the people who are going to be like, okay, let's kick some ass.
You don't think that would have ended in? You don't think that would have ended in disaster? I mean, Lore had the upper hand for most of the episode. He had control of Data.
I don't think that would have ended in disaster. Not at all. But see, really? I think the problem is that Next Generation at this point, well, I mean, it's the last season, so I guess for the entire run, was still operating under the, how do I say it? It was still
wrap up the story in 2 episodes max.
Not just that, but I'll give you a perfect example. There's a part where Picard and Troy, really lamely, by the way, they say, "Oh, he has a stomach ache." Calls the guard. That whole "let's trick the guard" trick, and they escape. And they escape only to have Data bring Geordi just around the corner, and it's like wah wah wah. Like there's no tension and there's no action. That scenario, that plot device on another show would have involved punching, a fight, a phaser battle, something. Like there would have been some kind of action. But Next Generation runs away from action every moment it can. So it just ends up coming off.
I have to stop. I have to stop you right there. I have to stop you right there. It does do it, but that's the whole point of TNG, is that like they were kind of like the anti.
Exactly.
Right.
So therefore, they should not use the tropes that they use, where let's try to escape, and then not escape because it's boring.
What would have been better? What in your mind? What would have been better?
I'm going to give you an example on Doctor Who, which doesn't, the Doctor's not very violent either. He uses humor. He uses the force of his personality. Somehow they make it witty, or they focus more on the dialogue in the prison cell itself, and there's a moment to reveal something or what have you. But I feel that in this episode it really shows the limitations that the writers had in using these typical action TV show tropes in Next Generation, because it just doesn't work. I mean, you had Picard, Geordi, and Troy trapped, and it was really dull, and it only picked up when Geordi would get rolled over to Data's lab and he's being tortured, and then that's where you're like, oh my god, what's going to happen? But everything else was very dull. Even the scene where they're surrounded and they're saying, okay, take them to the brig or whatever, like the way Picard and Troy and Geordi walk away, it's very casual. Like, there's not even a Borg going like, kind of pushing them, and Picard kind of pushing back. Like, those little things that on the original Star Trek show that would happen and would add a little bit of character to the moment. But no, it's just like, oh, we're captured. Okay, let's walk to the brig. Okay, let's sit down. All right, let's have a meeting. So why is Data acting this way? Geordi, do you have any thoughts? Counselor, do you have any thoughts? All right, let's synthesize a plan. Okay, let's execute the plan.
It wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad.
It is that bad. It is absolutely that bad. And then
I will.
Okay, go ahead.
I will say. Well, no, I didn't mean to interrupt you. You can finish.
No. I mean, that's basically my criticism. So go ahead. Counterpunch.
Okay. I think there's no counterpunch because I actually agree with you. This is not the best season opener by far. Like, I don't know. Like, if we had to think about it, what do we get? Season 2's opener was The Child, which was worse than this, I think. Season
absolutely.
Season 3's was Evolution. That's the one with Dr. Stubbs, and it's actually not like it's actually. I think we liked that episode, if I don't recall correctly.
When is Best of Both Worlds?
That best part 2 is the opener of season 4, which is
season 4.
You can't. Yeah, the best of both worlds. We're talking about season openers. I know it's a two-parter, right. But we're just talking about openers, right?
Yes, yes.
As far as we're concerned.
Yes, absolutely.
Then you can't beat Best of Both Worlds is the best season opener. Part 2.
Is absolutely.
It's just wins.
It's the best second part. It's really the best second parter.
It's also a really good second part. So I can't. Yeah. I'm not arguing with you. I actually feel like we're aligned in this, but I do think that it wasn't as bad as you say.
No, it is. It is as bad as I say.
What about Redemption? Redemption Part 2, which was the season 5 opener.
No, Redemption. Oh, Redemption. Yes, Redemption was a good one. It was a good season opener, on not on par with Best of Both Worlds, but definitely ranks as maybe the second best. Definitely the second.
And then we get Time's Arrow Part 2,
which is terrible.
So do you think this one is worse than Time's Arrow Part 2 or better?
I think this one's better only because Time's Arrow becomes I think the sins of Time's Arrow are that it's very silly and frivolous, and there's still some meat to this one because I do find the scenes where Geordi and Data, where Geordi's brain is about to get turned to mush and Data is doing this, there is menace. There's real menace to Data.
There is menace.
And Geordi is legitimately afraid. He's really worried about what's going to happen.
I mean, it's scary as fuck, though.
It is.
I just dropped another.
We're in rated R territory now.
Sorry there. Oh, sorry. No, we're still PG-13. I think it's like 3. That's definitely the last time I can use that word. I've screwed it for the two of us. You can't use it now at the end like you were planning on using it, perhaps.
Oh, shit. So I mean, I think, and then the other thing that I think is very potent about the episode is Lore's total. He's just demented. I mean, what the hell is his plan? Can we please talk about what the hell is his plan?
Do you think that this is a good ending for Lore, or would you like to see more Lore?
We should have had more Lore. We should have had more Lore.
Well, where you're talking about in the movies, then obviously, or do you think he should have come back in season 7?
He should have come back in season 7, and he should have come back in the movie.
So, do you think in Nemesis it should have been Lore was stolen from wherever he was being stored, and that? How do you think he could have fit into the movies? Like, where do you think?
Well, I mean, it would have needed a different plot, but I think instead of what we saw in Star Trek Erection, I think we should have had something with Lore, a plot involving Lore. Like maybe, okay, that opening scene where Data is shooting people, maybe it wasn't Data, maybe it was Lore who was shooting up something. And they're like, oh, but wait a minute, that's Mr. Data. And then it reveals that Lore had somehow escaped and switched places or whatever. I don't know.
Do you believe in redemption for Lore? I know we've talked about this with the Borg, where you were like, okay, Hugh represents a thing that you weren't expecting for the Borg, and that's one of the reasons you're kind of turned off or put off by him. As far as we know, Lore never got that. Lore is just through and through evil, so you're happy with that aspect of it. But what do you think do you think he can come back in Picard? Do you think we can have more Lore like in Picard, or do you think it's over?
I think Lore becomes less and less redeemable as we go on. I think there is some redeeming quality. You could just say he's misguided up until this, right? I mean, he has a weird brotherly love for Data.
The thing that we haven't talked about yet is that the crisis. We've been talking a lot about crises in our personal lives, but the crisis in this episode is that Lore genuinely is intent on replacing biological. Like, he's taking the Borg mission to the next level. He's saying, you Borg have it all wrong with your we will add your biological distinctiveness to our own. He's like, no, the way to go is to turn biologicals into full android. Like, there is no more biological life. Life should be mechanical moving forward in nature, in its expression, rather, I should say. Correct. Right? Correct. That's what he said. If he's successful, he's essentially wanting to do what the Cylons did. We're gonna go to Battlestar Galactica here, but that's basically the final 5 are his end goal. And
you realize just how insane that is. In the Star Trek universe. In the Battlestar Galactica universe, it's debatable because, that there doesn't seem to be any other kind of life form other than Cylon and humans, pretty much. Right. But in the context of Star Trek, for Lore to have that be his plan, the plan, is absolutely just insane. I mean, he's unhinged.
But do you think he could have? How far do you think he could have gotten? I mean, obviously he was no match for the crew of the Enterprise. But let's just say, how far do you? And do you think any of that is going to continue? Do you think any of the Borg, the Hugh Borg, what is going? We don't know there's some interesting tie-ins. Like, okay, so in the Picard trailer, there's a scene with a bunch of androids, or they look like androids. Yeah, just in this like cargo hold or something like that, right? Right. So I don't know. I feel like there is going to be something tied in to this idea of biological versus mechanical life. And as a matter of fact, in just reality in our own world, a friend of mine who's a dad sent me a picture of his kid wearing the virtual, like, it's over. They're all digital. Our children are digital.
What is he wearing?
He's wearing the thing. Like, the kid's just hanging out on the couch wearing the what? What is it? The VR helmet? Let people wear. You know what I'm talking about?
The VR glasses. Okay, yeah.
This kid has no idea what's going on around him. It's over. He's just in the virtual world. The only reason he can do it safely is because he's at home with his family. But that's it. Like, the virtual world is way more tempting. We've gotten to a point where like real life doesn't appeal to people anymore. It's crazy.
To certain people. I mean, certain people. I certainly am not. Yeah. But let me ask you, because this is the thing that the episode just doesn't really settle, is how many Borg did Lore have at his command?
I would guess, it doesn't make it clear in the episode, but I would guess because of the size of the Brutalist ship, and this is one of the failings of both Part 1 and Part 2, is we never see the other side. We never get a scene of the Borg commanding what it's like inside that ship. For all we know, there were no Borg in there. We never actually get scenes in there. I would say he had at least conservatively 3,000 Borg at his command, maybe even more. He could have had probably 5,000 to 10,000, because if you think of the Enterprise's crew complement, it's 1,000, and the size of that Borg ship, I doubt it's empty. I bet it's teeming with Lore Borg, as we'll call them for the purposes of this episode. So I'm guessing anyway. I'm gonna actually up that to 5,000. He has at least 5,000 to 10,000 Borg at his command. I don't know if they ever say it in the episode. I missed it if they did.
So,
what is that?
What is what?
You're holding a picture.
Oh,
of
yeah.
The Scooby-Doo,
I'm doing.
cast.
I'm multitasking. I'm doing the show, but I'm also doing something for work. I'm making pictures for work.
Nice.
I'm putting photographs.
Look, he's still analog, folks. It's not. He's actually
analog is good. Okay, but here's my question, because this is the thing that I feel is a failing, and I will lay the blame at the second episode, because I feel that the first episode is all set up, so really answers should come in the second one. The one thing that the thing that I think Next Generation never got right is that they always divided up the cliffhangers amongst two different writers. So you had one writer who had all the fun and would do all setup, and would write into a corner, and then that writer gets to walk away happy as a clam. Bye. It's up to you now to figure out how to get out of the corner. And even though as a writer that's a great exercise, the problem is that if it doesn't work, that's how the season starts, and there's a lot of questions that linger with this episode. And it
is curious because story by Jerry Taylor, teleplay for Part 1, Ron Moore, and then Part 2 it just says Renee Echeverria had the whole thing. It was the whole shebang was Renee Echeverria. So 3 writers between these 2 episodes.
Right, but the actual script is a different writer for 1 and 2. So the question becomes, and I read the novelization. The novelization also does not answer the questions I have, which is which you've asked this question: who the hell built those ships? Were those ships aliens that they encountered? Did that come from? What? Those ships were never seen again in the Borg.
Right. You think if TNG were around today, if TNG were being made today, you think this would have been half a season arc, right? It would have been a story we explored deeper.
It would have been more than 2 episodes for sure.
Yeah, more than 2 episodes. So you think it just kind of would have benefited from that?
My God, there's so much potential. You've got basically a rebellion, right? You got a rebel movement with Hugh, a nascent rebel movement with Hugh that Riker and Worf was going to basically, they like to spark. And
I mean, also, as far as taking risks, let's just say that the cybernetic, the positronic brain swap thing actually was successful, how it wouldn't have been so crazy. It would actually have been crazy cool and not that bad to have Geordi have a cybernetic brain moving forward. Could you imagine if
that's a bit much?
Don't you think though that would have been like much. You're talking about Doctor Who and taking risks? Like, could you like imagine if Geordi just had a cybernetic brain?
Now you're talking about Spock's brain, which is uniformly agreed to be the worst episode of the original show. So no,
Geordi's. It should have even been called
Geordi's
brain. It's so good.
I think there's another thing that I find a bit. I don't know what other than icky, it's the only word that comes to mind right now. But Geordi as a character, the whole point was of okay, we're going to show this character with a disability, and he overcomes the disability, and he's a capable, competent, critical member of this crew, and he can be a hero too. And yet, I feel that. Now, granted, it does work because of the relationship that Data and Geordi have, but still, there's a weird, icky quality to the fact that, okay, we're going to single out the black guy who's blind, and we're going to make him the one that is strapped to the chair and, is being tortured. And I'm like, you're going to pick on the disabled guy? Really? That's the one you're going to do? It could have been Picard.
When you're evil, that's how you start. It's an evil. He's just totally evil.
True, but it is exploitive in a way, and I think it's a little below Next Generation standards. They could have gone with Picard, who's
I think there was no. I think if you
the alpha
wanted,
male,
I think there was no choice. But maybe that's what's bad about it, is that it's pretty transparent that Geordi had to be the one to get sympathy from both Hugh and Data, because they both love it.
Right. It does work on that level, but there is still there's still an aftertaste of like, really, him? You pick on the disabled guy? That's just terrible.
I'm telling you, evil people, man. That's how they are.
Evil people,
evil folk. They go for the disabled folks first, and that's kind of how it happened in Nazi. Germany, it was like people were kind of like, that person's not like me. There's a famous poem. It's so wonderful and scary that I read when I was a kid. It was like they came for this person, but it wasn't my tribe or whatever. So it's I didn't do anything, And so we got to remember that, like, at the end of the day, it's like, you got to watch out. Those are the early signs. of danger is when they pick on people who are less able to defend themselves on their own. Because Picard would have basically, through his sheer Picardness, been able to subdue Data just by giving him I order you to snap out of it. Snap out of it, Data. I order you.
It would not have worked. It would not have worked.
But we could have put Picard through another assimilation. Come on, he was already damaged. You're like,
he's already damaged.
Keep damaging poor Picard, and then Troy's been raped countless times.
Oh no! Like, I never said to go down that route.
But she has. She's been violated so much.
Yes, she has. That's why I'm saying it should have been Picard. It should have been Picard, and he had it.
It should have been someone totally different, and they would have a cybernetic brain moving forward for.
Or it could have been Worf.
It could have been Worf.
They could have expanded his micro brain.
All right.
As Q, to quote Q.
No, I think it could only have been Geordi to get the Hugh Data sympathy thing going.
True.
Like,
I agree. But I just wanted to put that out there that it also.
No, it's a really good point.
It has that, and then
in my notes I have that the Borg, the Freed Borg or the Independent Borg, whatever we want to call it, the Freed Borg or the Independent Borg, they had very punk rock looking prosthetics. Like, some of their prosthetics look like mohawks and like spikes. They were a little more punk rock than the standard Borg. Did you notice any of that? Like a little bit?
No.
Oh, okay. All right.
I have to admit, I the only thing I noticed was that the scene where Riker and Worf are in the cave, and they're seeing. I mean, it's they're basically the Borg after, like, when they have no more opioids, and they're kind of like, you know,
that's right.
It's
a sad scene. Actually, that's
it's really quite pathetic. It's really quite pathetic.
Yeah.
It almost reminded me of the best version of A Christmas Carol is George C. Scott, the George C. Scott version. And you remember when the future opens up his cloak and you see, was it pestilence and greed or whatever?
Yeah,
you see these two children, and they're just like completely depraved and starved, and they look, and it's just like, oh, you know, you don't want to look at them, and that's the way.
You want to do the Count Dooku, like, oh, like the reaction, the Count Dooku reaction to when what's his face chops off Jango Fett's head.
Let's do the Dooku.
Oh. Mace Windu. I couldn't remember. I can't believe I couldn't remember Mace Windu. How could you forget Mace Windu? Hugh was kind of pissed at Riker and says, hasn't the crew of the Enterprise caused enough damage? I actually thought that was interesting. And I have to admit that this is more of, again, the episode becomes more interesting. Perhaps the last episode was better. This one's a little more interesting because there's themes that I've explored in other shows, and Doctor Who kind of explores this. It's like, you know, the Doctor's always going in and saving the day, and he does, or she does, or they do, for the most part. But there's also other casualties that you don't think about, and you know,
are there repercussions? Right.
Are there repercussions? And I actually thought that was a win for this episode in a sense. Is like just a line like that where Hugh actually challenges Riker, and he's like, "Listen, like you thought you did a good thing, but you didn't follow up. You didn't like guide us after the like. You know, you just kind of set us on our way."
Star Trek 2.
Yeah, it's very similar, right? Very similar. It's just like, you know, here, but I mean, in this sense, they thought they were liberating. They were like, go forth and enjoy, like, but they never took.
They never took stock, you know, like, and went right. Yeah.
They never thought, what would they have a hard time? Like, would they be eradicated? And actually, I was asking on Twitter. It was inspired by another tweet, but I was asking on Twitter, like, what's a good 7 of 9 episode, like a definitive few episodes to watch, and I got a bunch of responses, but Unimatrix Zero came up as one of the responses, and that's an interesting episode because it explores like that the Borg, when they're unconscious, when they're not connected, when they're recharging,
they there's go into
a dream collective as well. And I haven't finished watching. I've only watched part 1 so far, but I love the concept so much, and it makes, I know, you know, like it quote unquote humanizes the Borg yet again, and you don't like that perhaps, but in a way it's interesting because it's like, you know, these are the kinds of things that you don't think about when you're liberating an oppressed like people. You have to stay and help. You have to like give them something, don't you think? Like I think, you know, it's like
foreign policy. I mean, U.S. foreign policy is constantly debating that. I mean, you say, okay, we went into Iraq and we freed Iraq, but then...
Not that we're comparing anyone on Earth to the Borg.
Right, no. But right. What I'm saying is that, you know, some people say, well, we need to stay and we need to rebuild the country. And then other people are like, no, you go in, you beat the guy, and then you get out. And we've always had that debate in the foreign policies in the 20th century is it's arguable to say it's fairly easy to drop the big bomb and you destroy whatever, the big base, but then the rebuilding of the country, that's where the real challenge is. Right. And with the Borg, I mean, you could say that the thing that they were going to do in the Hugh episode, in the original one, was sort of a nano version of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Right, like essentially the virus was the bomb, right?
Was the bomb, right? And then Starfleet didn't take the time to rebuild the Borg afterwards. They just said no, just and actually, if you listen to the Admiral, that is the official Starfleet policy. Just nuke them. We don't want to rebuild them. Just blow them away. It's only Picard, it seems, Picard and the crew, who are maybe having second thoughts about, well, but what about the remaining Borg? I mean, in the original Hugh episode, Guinan was one of the most interesting characters because she's the one that's like, no, why are we're giving him names now?
Well, she started out. Yeah,
right.
She started out as completely like just
in one camp,
and
then she kind of flips to the other camp. So, it's a very interesting debate.
I think Guinan is your emotions at that time, in a way, because you can't not acknowledge Hugh's individuality, but at the same time you're like, shit, why?
You're saying me personally?
Yeah. I'm saying you're
yes, absolutely.
You're like, you can't disacknowledge that. Yes, okay, there is a individual there, but like, why? Like, why do we have to? Why do we have to go down this path?
Why do we have to go down this path?
It's like,
you're right.
So
you're absolutely right. I agree with you 100%. And
Lore is an interesting character, and they bring him to an end. We never see him again. You say that you don't want to see him again in Picard, right? Like you don't care if he comes back ever again, or you do want to see him in Picard.
I would like to see him in Picard. I don't think he's going to be in Picard.
Okay, gotcha. I see what you're saying.
I think Lore was probably the greatest underused villain in the canon. Next Generation didn't establish a lot of through and through villains. I really found his whole relationship with Data very interesting, and then when you I think they really upped his game in this episode, in these two episodes, because now Lore is more than just this evil twin to Data. Now he's taken on a cult leader like aspect to him. I mean, when you see how there was that scene where the Borg came to him, and the Borg is having second thoughts, and Lore does the little thing and says, "Oh, you need a little more fairy dust
juice,
or whatever, a little more juice."
Yeah, we should actually talk about that. Essentially, this is it's using emotions as a parallel for like substance abuse in a sense, because
right.
Lore is feeding both Data. Data in this episode is a total junkie for emotions, right? But we could easily just say he's addicted to something. Like it's just an addiction episode. How do you think that the episode, with everything else that was going on, did you think that all that came through the way it should have? And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, yes, but I think the thing that came out more was just the idea of a cult leader, and through personality and through drugs. I mean, cult leaders often employ drugs as well to keep the cult going. That's the thing that stood out to me, that it really reminded me of these bizarre cults that happen. I mean, there was recently the weird sex one that involved somebody from Smallville, an actress from Smallville.
What? Okay.
Yeah, look it up.
Jeez,
it was a weird sex cult where everybody had to have sex with Lore, let's say, and
I'm sure
this
that was
happening.
I'm sure that was happening in Lore's demented Borg cult. I'm sure there was some kind of weird shit like that happening. I do want to say, we can go on that tangent if you really want to, but I want to say, you kind of inspired me to think about something. Lore takes the emotion chip that was meant for Data, and he already had one, and he adds it to it. So he's also a junkie in a sense. He's overdosing. He has his own emotion chip, and now he has Data's, the one intended for Data,
right,
as well. And so he has an abundance of this like whatever emotional drug, and he's able to like share that with it's kind of intense, like technologically what he's doing. It's like he basically is ensuring his existence because he's able to feed everyone else these emotions. And I forgot the true ending of this episode is actually Data extracts his emotion chip from Lore at the end, and he's contemplating destroying it because of what it led to in himself. And Geordi, actually, who was the worst affected by Data's emotional, journey in this episode, says, no, as your friend, I can't let you destroy this. And of course we get a follow-up in Generations. For some reason the emotion chip becomes like 5 times bigger in Generations. I remember commenting on that. But I thought that was interesting, is that like Data's ready to just say, okay, I tried emotions, it didn't work for me, I'm going to destroy this emotion chips. And Geordi's like, no, he has hope for Data at the end. He's like, I actually think you can handle emotions. I actually don't think that the way that Lore had you believing emotions have to exist are the truth of emotions. Like, I think Lore only fed him anger and hatred, and Geordi's like, save this, because what else might be on here is love and joy and a lot of other emotions that you weren't actually accessing during this whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's the scale. What you were saying about how he's able to divvy out this emotional drug or whatever, that's another, and that is in the back of my head as I'm trying to understand the scale of this cult that Lore is leading. Because if you say that he has how many Borg?
5,000 to 10,000 minimum.
So he's feeding. He's able to,
for the android, for technology, for techno beings, it's scalable, right? Because you can repeat.
Oh, but it all can't come from Lore. Like, he's got to have an infrastructure for this.
I believe it's there, but we don't see it in the.
But we don't see it.
Yeah, so this is headcanon. We don't see how.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly. But who built it? Yeah. How extensive is this? It's got to cross different ships. It's got to. I mean, like how does? So I mean, there's a lot of infrastructure here.
Yeah. Croissant or Croesus is able to repeat it. Remember in the episode, he's actually has it on his thigh. He has like a repeater, and he's able to like influence Data with it as well. It's true.
Croesus is an interesting character to bring up now, because Croesus, in spite of whatever Lore does, I think Croesus enjoys what he's doing.
Right.
So I think if you want to call Lore the Hitler, Croesus is like the Himmler or something.
Yeah.
So
you want to call Lore the Hitler?
Let's call Lore the Hitler.
Like yeah, it's true.
So there's like, I also feel like, again, if this were being done today, there would be a cabal of Borg who are following Lore, not because they're being fed this, but because they genuinely are also evil and demented and want to rule the universe. So I just wish we'd had. There's plenty of material here that could have been expanded on. We could have done 4 or 5 episodes on this. I think the fact that they have to kind of all wrap it up in one episode, one and done, I think takes away from for me from enjoying it as much as I did the first part. Mm-hmm. I think especially, like even you alluded to in the summary, Data and Lore have a very short, quick little. It's not even a fight. It's just kind of a
confrontation,
really. And then that's it. Lore's done, and the final image of Lore is him. It's a sort of this from the ground up, and Lore.
Great shot,
but that's it. We never see Lore again, and it's such a shame, because the idea of Lore as this charismatic cult leader of the Borg sounds like it's a wonderful idea that had legs. I mean, how great would it have been if somehow Lore would have escaped with some Borg, and then we would have had, instead of instead of insurrection, we could have had a return of Lore and his cult of Borg.
Well, it would have been back-to-back Borg films, but I do think that it would have been interesting. I do think that, like, whatever could have happened on Voyager for sure, because Lore could have eventually figured out the dynamics of traveling through these warp conduits or whatever they're called, that the Borg use to travel great distances. And it would have been interesting to end that conflict or continue that conflict like a Borg civil war of sorts, where they're both against the Federation and, actually they're both against biologicals, but they're also fighting amongst themselves. So you have the more traditional Borg, which is the big bad still, and then you have this like kink in their side, but it's also against the Federation. So it would have really felt dire, I think, if you had both of these factions trying to oppress biologicals in a way. It would have been an interesting thing to pursue in Voyager, perhaps.
You're right, actually. That would have made Voyager more interesting. I think this episode, I've always said the Borg always resembled the Cybermen from Doctor Who. But I think in these two episodes, they go from being the Cybermen to the Daleks, because the Daleks, Lore sort of becomes Davros. And then you have a splinter cell, because after a certain point, there's a group of Daleks that always follow Davros, and then you have the larger Dalek faction, which is the whatever
independent, right?
They're the Emperor Dalek and all that stuff. So it would have been interesting if we'd been able to continue to have Lore sort of always out there with this ragtag band of angry Borg, looking for revenge against Data, Picard, or anybody. And it could have come up in Voyager. It would have made Voyager very interesting. But then again, I don't know. Of course, all that with Lore, it all depends on Brent Spiner. I don't know what Brent Spiner's feelings are on Lore. I've never read an interview where he talks extensively about Lore. I've never watched an interview, so I don't know if he found Lore to be tedious, or I don't know if he ever thought about, killing Data and just continuing as Lore. I don't know. That certainly would have been interesting, but I don't know. I really don't know. The continuing use of Lore depends on Brent Spiner, and the fact that we never got it again, I think maybe indicates that he doesn't like playing Lore. I don't know.
Well, it's a tough role. In this episode, it was pretty heavy to have both Lore and evil Data. I just felt like I always enjoyed the kind of one fault I will give is that Data not having any power or willpower is to me kind of a mistake, or a diminishing of his character. Because what was cool about Lore is that you always had Data to counteract him. No matter what, Data, and ultimately this episode gets there. But Data, I'm telling you, if it weren't for that one flaw in his programming, that you could reset his ethical programming. There was no difference between Lore and Data at this point. It was it was scary. It was a really scary situation, and so I think it worked, but I think it was wrong to not have that force. So having a post-Data world in which Lore is still around, even though he's deactivated, it is intriguing, and we do have an opportunity to repair perhaps some of the wrongs of this part of the story by ending it differently. It would be very interesting. What an interesting thing it would be to find out the impact if Lore actually learned. What if Lore this whole time it's like a true Moriarty Sherlock situation where one can't really function? What if Lore can't imagine being evil without Data? His brother is dead. What does he do now? That's his he doesn't give a shit about anyone else. He only really has ever tried to convince Data to see his way. And now that Data's gone, he doesn't have that opportunity anymore. It's so a crisis Lore would be an interesting thing to explore.
Crisis Lore.
crisis. A lot of crises going on. But one crisis we don't have is the fact that we could talk about these things forever. But I think I feel good about what we've covered in our discussion today. Do you have anything else to add?
No, I think we've covered just about everything. Yeah.
All right, I'll go first with my rating. Based on our discussion, oftentimes this does happen where I do change my initial thoughts, but based on the discussion, I have to kind of agree that part one was, even though Captain Crusher crushing it was great, and that's probably where I'm going to give most of it, I do think that like the episode could have gone further, could have gone deeper, could have gone like just a little further. Maybe TNG should have broken the first three-parter. You know, Deep Space Nine goes on to do that later, where it's going to have the first three-parter. It's going to be closing of the season and then two-parter for the opening of the season, which is what DS9 does. But maybe that's what we should have gotten here in TNG now that I think about it and looking at it, because there's so much potential for this episode. So I'm going to give it a 7.
I give it a 5. I mean, it's
you were just waiting. You were sitting pretty. You were just sitting there like, all right.
It was a 5 when this started, and it's a 5 when the discussion's over.
All right. Well, it was like definitely an 8 for me before, so it went down a notch to a 7.
Oh wow,
so,
I knocked it down.
Yeah, I knocked it down. So good discussion. Sometimes that's what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Season 7. What do you remember? It's not your favorite season, right?
No.
So we already jumped the shark as far as you're concerned. So the rest of the season.
The shark has been jumped.
I want to quick. We've never done this before, but I want to quickly. Let me see if I still have the list open here. I want to quickly go over what's ahead and just hear your what you remember. TNG season 7 list. Here we go. Let's see here. So we have liaisons coming up. No memory of what's going on there?
No.
What about interface?
That's all where Crusher and Picard are linked, and they finally admit that the
No, interface is Geordi's mom.
Oh God. And then comes Geordi's dad.
Wait, then we have Gambit Part 1 and Part 2. That's
I remember
a good
that.
one.
That's the one where Picard's a pirate.
Yep. Phantasms.
Is that the one where Crusher's ghost... The ghost of Crusher's grandmother or something?
No, that's...
Oh, that's Sub Rosa, right?
Sub Rosa, which is
this season.
Which is this season. You're going to do that one with me? Or are you into Sub Rosa?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
All right, that sounds good. The Phantasms, I can't remember, actually, but it had... What was this? Let's see. Data's dream program leads to apparently aberrant behavior. I think it's the one where he starts making that weird high-pitched scream, and the construction workers. you don't remember any?
Troy's a cake.
Troy's a cake. That's the one. Okay. I think that's the one. The "Don't come around here no more. You won't find what you're looking for." Dark Page. I think that's the Loxana Troy episode.
Oh, that Troy has a sister she didn't know about.
Attached is the one you were talking about earlier, with Crusher and Picard being linked.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember Force of Nature at the moment. Inheritance, Parallels, the Pegasus, that's a good one.
Pegasus is good.
Homeward, Sub Rosa, Lower Decks, another good one, which there's an animated series coming out called Lower Decks, inspired somewhat by this episode. Thine Own Self, Masks, that one I'm gonna try my best to get the Empress
that's
on
not
that.
Gonna happen. That's not gonna happen.
I'm gonna try. It might happen. You never know.
It may be on audio only, but I don't.
It might happen. It might happen. Well, I'm down. You know, Starfleet Boy can't be video all the time. It's true. So hopefully I can get the Empress. That would be my dream come true. I have the Beholder. Don't remember what that one's about. Do you?
I don't know. Worf's
Genesis.
Planet Forbidden.
which directed by Gates McFadden, by the way, and Jonathan Frakes directed Sub Rosa.
Oh, Genesis is the one where everybody starts the evolution. They start.
They go back to.
That's a good
that's
one.
right.
That's the only episode.
That's
It's right. It's the only episode she directed. There's a lot of makeup
Then
effects.
there's Journey's End.
Isn't that the last episode?
No, that's all good. Journey's End
it's
is
confusing because the
Wesley's
documentary.
return. Journey's End is Wesley's return with the. That's the one.
Oh, that's when he becomes a Native American. Okay.
And then the traveler comes back again.
Right.
And they travel together.
Have you seen the talk online that there's a character in the trailer for Picard who it's not the same actor, but makeup wise and even in his hands resembles the traveler. It looks like he's from the same race. Yeah.
In the trailer?
Yeah, he's talking to an old man, like on a porch or something, like outside.
I thought that was a Romulan.
No, it's not a Romulan.
Because there's the Ridgey
Look at his
Romulans
hands.
and the non
Look at his hands.
Oh, I gotta check it out.
His hands are like the traveler. Yeah.
Very interesting. Very good. I gotta look at that now. Then you get Bloodlines, Emergence, Preemptive Strike. Don't remember those, and All Good Things. So interesting season up ahead.
All right, live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper, everybody. Thank you, Doctor, for joining me. Audience, if you liked this episode, please like it and subscribe and share your thoughts below in the comments and let us know what you thought of our discussion as well as this episode. And thank you, Doctor. Have a great evening.
Thank you. You as well.